This episode contains material of a highly sensitive nature, including suicide, that may be triggering for some individuals. Listener discretion advised. Bruno leaned over and reached out to touch Isabella's arm. He felt her soft, warm skin and quickly withdrew his hand. He tried to think of a time when she had held him in her arms and hugged him, but no memory came to mind. He had once heard the housekeeper and nanny gossip that she had never given him a bottle or rocked him to sleep. He tried to imagine a kind of loving mother who laughed and kissed him on the cheeks as she tickled him. But his mind went blank. There was no love and no happiness. There never had been. Bruno felt a sense of hopelessness wash over him. Isabella had given him life, and he had taken hers. His mother had been cruel, but what he had done to her was even colder. Her relatives continued their barrage of unkind words and angry accusations, but Bruno didn't hear them. His body felt heavy, and darkness enveloped him. His vision went black, and he fainted. Nurse Sharon quickly wheeled him out of Isabella's ward and called for the doctor. She lifted him back into his bed, and the doctor gave him an injection. It was late at night when Bruno finally woke up again. He opened his eyes and stared into the dim room. A light shone under the door from the hallway, and he rolled his head to look away. He wished he had died like the Healy brothers. He had always felt that he was worthless and unwanted, but now he felt like the scum of the earth, like he was the lowest form of life. He stared blankly at the ceiling, waiting aimlessly for time to pass. Eventually, he felt his body regain some of its former strength, and he was able to prop himself up against the pillows. He took his time before he swung his legs out of the bed and stood on trembling feet. He leaned over and grabbed his clothing on the bedside table. He reached into his jacket pocket for his phone. The battery had died. He needed to recharge it. He slumped back into the bed and pressed the button for the nurse. Nurse Sharon appeared a few minutes later. "Do you need to go to the bathroom?" He shook his head. "I want to charge my phone." She smiled kindly. "I'll take it to the nurse's station. There's a charger there." Bruno sighed and leaned back. He closed his eyes and waited for the nurse to return. After a long while, Nurse Sharon opened the door and handed him his phone. "It's fully charged. Is there anything else you need?" "Thanks. No, I'm fine." He switched his phone on and was surprised to see a few missed calls and unread messages from an unknown caller. Bruno's heart leaped, hoping the messages were from Layla, although he didn't expect she would ever try to contact him again after seeing him with another woman. He clicked on the envelope icon and began to read the messages. "It's me, Layla. Answer your phone. Are you okay? Did something happen? I'm sure you have a reasonable explanation. Please, answer your phone. Whatever it is, we can face it together. I don't understand. I've known you my whole life. This isn't like you. Something else is going on. Please tell me what it is. I know you love me. Why are you behaving like this? Was it those bullies again? What do they have over you? My dad will help you. Just tell me what it is. Don't give up. I love you. I miss you." His hand began to shake as he read the messages, and his eyes flooded with tears. He buried his face in his hands and sobbed. The pain he felt was indescribable. His life was a mess. Even before he had been born, there had been chaos. His biological father had been a monster, and he had unwittingly followed in his footsteps. He was a murderer who had taken the life of his mother. He didn't know how he would ever be able to face Layla again. She was pure and innocent, and he was a worthless bastard son of a low-class scumbag. He pressed his head against the soft pillows and lay motionless for a long time. The room was still dark, with only a thin slither of light coming from underneath the door. He closed his eyes and waited for the sun to rise. Bruno woke up to the sound of voices coming from Isabella's room down the hallway. A representative from the Healy family had finally arrived, and they were having a heated discussion with Isabella's family about what to do. A doctor patiently explained that she wouldn't recover and that she would need to be on life support for her organs to continue functioning. Both families eventually decided that switching off the life support machine was the best option. Being Isabella's only son, the nurse told Bruno he had to go to her room while a lawyer read her will. Nurse Sharon wheeled Bruno down the hall. His body was still weak from the poison. He sat by her bedside while the lawyer read her will. Isabella's last will states the following. The property in Havana is to remain the home of her son Bruno. The rest of her property, savings, investments, and shares are to be split equally among the members of the Healy family. Bruno wasn't surprised at how Isabella had distributed her inheritance. But Isabella's family became outraged and glared at the Healy family's representative. They couldn't accept that Isabella had left them nothing and demanded that the Healy family give some of the inheritance to them. They argued angrily, and their tempers flared. Eventually, the doctor raised his voice over the commotion. May I please remind you that the patient is on her deathbed? We need to make a decision. The room fell silent briefly until they all started to talk at once. Switch her life support off. She's never going to wake up. Yeah, we're not going to pay for her to be kept alive by machines. As they began to find any excuse to justify their decision, Bruno cleared his throat. Keep it on. I'll sell my house to keep her alive. Everyone gawked at him with their mouths hanging open. No one could believe their ears. The doctor was about to say something when, suddenly, 2 police officers entered the room. We're looking for Bruno Torres. Which one of you is Bruno? Bruno's heart leapt into his throat, and he felt his skin become cold. I'm Bruno. The police officer nodded. I'm sorry to disrupt you at a time like this, but we need to take your statement. Bruno nodded. Nurse Sharon unlocked the wheels of his wheelchair. You can talk in his room. Follow me, please. The police officers waited for Bruno to climb back into his hospital bed before they started taking his statement. They approached him aggressively and bombarded him with questions. Your mother's family has suggested that you were the one who poisoned her and the 4 Healy brothers. Can you tell us what happened that night? Did you see anything unusual before you were poisoned? You have to tell us everything in as much detail as possible. Who opened the bottle of rum? Bruno felt his head spin, and he tried to answer as quickly as possible. I don't know who opened the bottle. When I arrived on the patio, the server had already placed a tray with a bottle of rum and glasses on the table. The bottle was already open. They were smoking cigars, and I filled their glasses to make a toast. I don't know why my mom drank the rum. It was a rare vintage, so I suppose she wanted to taste it. All I can remember is that I started to feel sick, and the other men had started to foam at their mouths. One of them fell over onto the table. I tried to get help, but a pot plant was in my way. Don't know what happened after that. Bruno calmly recalled the evening and answered their questions as thoroughly as possible. The police officers snapped their notebooks shut and thanked him for his help before leaving. They told him that they saw no reason to suspect him, seeing as he had also been poisoned. They also said that the doctor had told them that he had just barely survived, and it had taken the emergency doctors hours to flush the poison out of his system to save his life. Bruno breathed a sigh of relief when they closed the doors behind them. He quickly splashed water over his face before he went back to Isabella's room. He walked into the room and was shocked to find it empty. Everything was gone, including Isabella. He panicked and hurried to the nurse's station. Where is she? The nurse looked at him and shook her head. I'm so sorry. The family decided to switch off the machines. Her heart beat for a few minutes before it stopped. Her body has been taken away, and the family has instructed the funeral parlor to collect it. Bruno's heart sank, and he started to sway. The world around him began to spin, and he saw shining spots floating in the air. An older nurse, who had been sitting behind a desk, looked up at him and then turned to the nurse he had been talking to. Is this the patient who survived the poisoning? The younger nurse nodded. Yeah, his mother, Miss Isabella Torres, has just passed away. She was the woman on life support. It was bizarre. She hadn't even taken her last breath, and they had already called the lawyer to read her will. Her family got into an awful argument with her lawyer and a representative from the Healy family. It was shocking to witness. The older nurse frowned. Is that the Isabella Torres that married into the Healy family? The younger nurse nodded. Yeah. Why do you ask? The older nurse shrugged. Oh, it's nothing. It's just a strange coincidence, that's all. She stood up and picked up a clipboard before walking away to tend to another patient. Bruno didn't know how he got back to his room. He sat on the edge of the bed, and his thoughts became more precise. He knew what he had to do. He leaned over, opened the bedside cabinet door, and reached for a small toiletry bag. He rummaged around until he found a disposable razor. He stared at the razor for a long time before breaking the blade free from the plastic casing. The blade was small and very sharp. He twirled it in between his fingers and gently swiped it across the palm of his hand. The skin tore open and began to bleed. He watched the blood drip onto the floor, but didn't feel any pain. He thought about the countless times that the Healy brothers had bullied him and how, even then, he hadn't felt any pain. He had become so used to it that he didn't notice it anymore. He felt the blade in his right hand and turned his left arm so his wrist faced upward. Then, he scrunched his bleeding hand into a tight fist and waited for his artery to protrude under his skin. He took a deep breath as he pushed the blade across the bulging artery. He watched as warm blood squirted out and flowed onto the floor. He closed his eyes and pictured Layla. He recalled the softness of her lips and how she had blushed when they had kissed for the first time. He heard her sweet voice echo in his mind when she told him that she loved him. The blood flowed, and he smiled. He remembered the day Zoe had arrived at his house and introduced Layla to him. He had stuck out his tongue at her, and she had smiled sweetly. He had only been a small boy, and the memory was faint, but he almost felt as if he were still standing in the entrance hall, gazing at the pretty little girl and her friendly mother. He wondered if that's what one's memories look like when death was near. He wished he could go back in time to when he first met Layla. He would have been kinder to her. He would have spent more time with her and not have been so mean. He would have loved her and pampered her. But it was too late. He pushed the blade against his skin again, but with more force and urgency than before. As he fell back onto the bed, Nurse Sharon opened the door and saw what he had done. She screamed and ran toward him. She grabbed his wrists and began to apply pressure to slow the bleeding. Help! Quick! Her voice rang through the hallway, and a team of nurses and doctors immediately rushed toward the room. Nurse Sharon was a strong woman, and she pushed her weight down on Bruno to stop him from trying to fight her off. He felt his life slipping away, and his vision became blurry. As the nurses and doctors sprang into action to stop the bleeding, Bruno closed his eyes and fainted. Bruno dreamed that he was floating in the air. It was dark, and a faint light shone in the distance. Then, he heard the frantic shouting of people, and the light disappeared. He didn't know how long he had been sleeping, but when Bruno opened his eyes, he glanced around the room and felt deeply disappointed. He couldn't even get it right to die. A thick bandage covered his left arm, which hurt when he moved. Nurse Sharon had been observing him while she waited for him to wake up. She saw him stir and quietly got up from her seat. She walked over to him and took his right hand in hers. There are better ways to deal with your problems. I'm sorry you lost your mother, but you're still so young. You have your whole life ahead of you. She sighed and smiled at him kindly. There are people who care about you. You have to look past the darkness to see the light. I'm going to call head nurse Bethany now. She said she wanted to talk to you when you woke up. Bruno turned his head away and stared blankly at the wall. A short while later, a much older nurse knocked on the half-open door. She sat on a small bench beside the bed and checked his pulse. She gazed at him briefly before she finally spoke. I met you and your mother many years ago. Bruno turned his head to look at her and frowned. Head nurse Bethany smiled faintly. I interned in a maternity ward as a young nurse. I was at the same hospital where your mother gave birth to you. She paused momentarily, as if trying to recollect something. You were the first baby I helped deliver. But it wasn't your delivery that I remember. It's what happened shortly after that's been ingrained in my memory ever since. Your mother was accompanied by her husband at the time of your birth. I remember him because he came from a well-known family in Havana. The whole family arrived at the hospital with flowers and balloons to celebrate your birth. Everyone laughed and congratulated your parents. Your father beamed, proud to welcome a son into the family. Bruno looked at her, enchanted by her story. He had never been told about the day he had been born. She spoke slowly. Then, someone flipped open a medical file on the bedside table and read your medical report. They showed it to your father, who suddenly got angry and chased everyone out. Bruno frowned again, and the nurse continued. The file contained a report about your blood type. Your father was a type O, and you were a type AB. I don't know if you studied biology at school, so let me explain. A baby born to a type O parent can't be a type AB. Because of that, your father realized that you weren't his biological child. Bruno's eyes went wide, and he stared at her in disbelief. She paused again to allow him time to digest what she had just said before she continued. Your parents quarreled for a long time, and your father eventually left. I don't know why they didn't consider a divorce, and I suspect it had to do with their families. Anyhow, your mother stayed in the hospital alone, and the doctor suggested that we send a nurse to sit with her for a while to keep her company. After all, she had just given birth and was in a state because of the argument with her husband. The nurse took a deep breath. This is very hard for me to recount. I checked in on her and told her I'd be right back. I left the room to call another nurse, and when I returned, I noticed something strange. The nurse stopped and looked into the distance. She was trying to smother you. Bruno gasped, and his body began to shake. We had left you with her so that she could initiate breastfeeding, which is standard practice, especially after a relatively easy labor. Newborns don't always latch on immediately, and you were asleep when I left the room. But when I came back, I heard your muffled crying coming from under the covers, and your mother was holding you down. Your little cries had almost stopped by the time I ran over and pulled you free. Bruno didn't know how to react. He held his breath and felt his heart sink. The nurse put her hand on his arm. Your mother was shocked when she saw me, and she immediately let go. She quickly explained that you started to cry. She was trying to comfort you. I didn't have time to listen to her and immediately performed CPR on you. Your mother became hysterical, and I had to give her something to calm her down. I waited for her to compose herself, and then she became aggressive and threatened me. I was still young and had just started nursing, so I promised her that I wouldn't say a word to anyone. She changed her attitude. I thought she must have realized her mistake. I've been worried about you for 20 years. I've always wondered if you were safe and if you were raised properly. I often blamed myself for not saying something, but the years passed and I focused on my work and saving lives. When I found out that your mother had passed away and I discovered that you were also in the hospital, I decided I had to tell you. I'm so sorry. I see that your childhood must have been a miserable one. Bruno looked up at the ceiling and felt tears well in his eyes. He tried to choke them back, but they began to stream down his cheeks. He had thought that after trying to kill himself, he would turn his life around and never allow his sadness or disappointment to destroy him again. But the news that his mother had wanted to kill him shocked him to the core. He would never be able to forget that his mother hadn't wanted him. He thought back to when he had been a toddler and had fallen into the pond. He would have drowned that day if it hadn't been for Blackie. He wondered if Isabella had seen it and had done nothing on purpose. But it was too late to confront her about it now. Bethany looked into his eyes. There are 2 reasons why I've told you this today. First, it has been lying heavily on my conscience for so long, and I need to be free of it. And second, I hope this will make you change how you look at your life. Bruno frowned, confused. I don't know what you've been through, but you should know that you are in charge of your own life and must live it for yourself. Although it was given to you by your parents, they are not responsible for what you make of it. It's up to you to bring happiness into your life, and it's up to you how to deal with your disappointment. You must love yourself and not rely on the love of others to feel fulfilled. There is no need to want to die because your mother is dead. She held his gaze for a long time. Do you understand what I mean? Bruno wanted to reply, but he couldn't make a sound. She squeezed his arm gently. I saved you once when you were a newborn, and I saved you again now when you wanted to kill yourself. I can't guarantee I'll be able to save you a third time. Only you can save yourself. You have your whole life waiting for you. She stood up and smiled at him. Think about it. Bruno watched the nurse leave and waited for her to close the door. In the stillness of his hospital room, he slowly tried to make sense of what she had just told him. He found it difficult to breathe, and he felt numb and empty. He thought about Isabella and suddenly began feeling immense hatred for her. He had almost killed himself because of her, yet she had never wanted him in the first place. His whole life had been a farce. His mother had cursed him with a terrible life, and he wondered why he had even been born. Head nurse Bethany's words of wisdom had struck a chord, but he didn't know how he would do what she had suggested. He felt confused and conflicted. He had almost died twice in just a few short days, but it didn't seem like death wanted him either. He didn't see the point in being alive. He wasn't worthy of someone like Layla. He couldn't give her the happiness she deserved because he was born out of misery, and it seemed like his gloom followed him wherever he went. He lay in bed, dead still, like a living corpse. Because of his attempted suicide, he had to stay in the hospital for observation, and the wound on his arm needed time to heal. The nurse had told him he would have to stay for at least a month. Although he didn't resist taking his medications or fight against the medical staff's efforts to help him, he didn't have any expectations. He felt as though he were just an empty shell, cruising aimlessly through a world of chaos. Bruno stared out of the window. His mind was blank, and he felt lifeless. He heard the door open, and he didn't bother turning his eyes to see who had entered his room. Instead, he continued to stare into space until the figure blurred in his peripheral vision. He ignored it, assuming it was Nurse Sharon who had come to check his medical file or empty the trash can. The figure stepped into his line of sight, and Bruno gradually forced his eyes to focus. He hadn't expected to see Layla. The sunlight formed a halo around her head, as if she were an angel. Layla sat on a small bench beside his bed. She was shocked, and for a moment, she didn't believe it was really him. He had lost weight, and he looked different. He also seemed dull, as if he had lost his spirit. Although he recognized her, he didn't respond or look at her. Instead, he stared into the void he had become lost in. Layla's eyes were moist with tears, and she reached out to hold his hand. Her voice trembled. Bruno, what has happened to you? He didn't respond. His throat was dry, and even if he wanted to, he found it impossible to force any sound out of his mouth. He hadn't spoke since he had been safe from trying to kill himself. It was as though he had forgotten how to speak. Layla let go of his hand and leaned closer. She gently moved a strand of hair away from his eyes. The warmth of her fingertips against his forehead made him flinch, and she quickly drew her hand back, shocked at the pain in his eyes. She sighed and wiped the dampness under her eyes away before reaching out to hug him. She held him tightly, not caring that his body recoiled slightly and stiffened against hers. Bruno wanted to push her away, but he didn't have the strength. His inner voice told him he was dirty, and he was going to make her dirty too. Layla let go and sat down again. Bruno, I know what happened to your family. Please don't be so sad. I'm here for you. Again, he heard his inner voice taunt him. He reminded himself that he was worthless and should be ashamed of himself. He didn't deserve someone who treated him so well. Yet there she was, and he knew she loved him. He slowly turned his gaze to look at her. She had just wiped her tears dry, but the rims of her eyes were red, and her eyelashes were wet. She looked at him, and he saw his reflection in her dark pupils. He focused on his reflection and saw the outline of a dejected figure, devoid of life. He tried to speak, but only his lips moved, and no sound escaped his mouth. Layla gazed at the thick bandage around his left arm. She sighed sadly and took his right hand in hers. Everything is going to be okay. What happened is in the past. The new semester starts next month, and I'm sure you'll be discharged before that. We'll start the new semester together, like we've wanted to for so long. Bruno listened to her, but he didn't reply. Did you see the messages I sent you? I'm not mad at you. I'm just sorry that you didn't want to face your troubles with me at your side. She gazed at him and smiled faintly. You weren't like this when you were young. You always seemed so distant. I did all the talking, and you just kept quiet. She stood up and walked toward the bathroom. Let me clean your face. It'll make you feel better. She disappeared into the bathroom, and he listened to her run the warm water tap. She returned with a damp face cloth and slowly wiped his face. She gently pressed the face cloth against his sunken cheeks and wiped it toward his neck. Her heart ached, and she felt sorry for him. When she finished, she went back to the bathroom to rinse the face cloth. Then she returned to the small bench, sat down, and reached for his hand again. I heard that a new restaurant is open close to the university. We can go there when you're feeling better. That new movie I've been waiting for is about to be released, so if you get better sooner, we can go watch it. She continued to speak about trivial matters and didn't once mention anything about his attempted suicide. She didn't know what had gone through his mind at the time or how he had been feeling, but she knew something must have pushed him over the edge. She also knew he wasn't ready to talk about it either. You look tired. I'll leave so you can rest. We can talk about everything later. She was about to get up to leave, but he tightened his fingers around her hand. His slender fingers were cold and his grip was weak, but she kept still and gazed at him with large eyes. Layla smiled and her eyes lit up. Would you prefer me to stay? Bruno didn't reply. Instead, he closed his eyes and the hard lines around his mouth softened. She looked down at his hand clasped around hers and breathed a sigh of relief. The last few weeks had been rough and her nerves were finished. It had been a roller coaster ride of emotions for her. At first, she had been shocked, and then her shock had turned into realization, followed by denial, and then, finally, acceptance. But seeing him in such a state upset her terribly, and she tried not to show it. Reggie had told her about the death of his mother and the 4 Healy brothers. He had explained that they had been poisoned and that Bruno had also almost died. He had then told her that Bruno had attempted suicide because of his mother's death. She struggled to imagine what had gone through his head at that time and what emotions had driven him to feel so hopeless. She had been furious at him. She couldn't believe that he had tried to kill himself and wondered why he had wanted to die when he had her in his life. She had felt like their plans for their future together and all their dreams and hopes were worth nothing. She had eventually calmed down enough to visit him at the hospital. Seeing him lying motionless on the hospital bed with glassy eyes gazing into space almost broke her heart. Although she harbored anger for his actions, she was grateful that he was okay. She held his hand in both of hers and took a deep breath. Bruno felt exhausted. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. His consciousness soon slipped into a chaotic dream state. In his dream, he felt the touch of her warm skin against his. Distorted scenes flashed through his mind, and then everything went dark. Throughout it all, he remained aware of Layla beside him. Her warmth was all he needed. Bruno slept for a long time, and it was evening by the time he woke. Layla was still sitting on the bench beside him. She was only an arm's distance away, and he wanted to reach out for her. She smiled when she saw that he was awake, and her eyes twinkled. How are you feeling? Are you hungry? Nurse Sharon had left them alone to give them privacy and knocked softly on the door. It's dinner time. I brought 2 warm bowls of pasta. I hope you like it. Layla smiled. I'm not fussy, thank you. It smells delicious. Nurse Sharon placed the tray on the overbed table and closed the door behind her as she left. Layla took the lids off the containers and unwrapped the cutlery. She unfolded the paper napkin and carefully tucked it around Bruno's neck. Then she scooped a small portion of pasta onto a spoon and held it out for him to eat. The fragrance of the food struck his nostrils, and he opened his mouth. Layla quietly fed him, and he ate slowly. The warm food slid down his throat, and he felt the coldness in his body gradually dissipate. He heard Bethany's words rising in his ears again. You have to learn to love yourself, even if no one loves you. You cannot choose who gives birth to you, but you can choose how to live your life. The elderly nurse didn't know he already had someone who loved him. Layla was like a bright, shining light in the darkness. She was someone who wanted him to love her. He ate the last spoonful of pasta as the realization dawned on him, and he looked at her with tears glistening in his eyes. His Adam's apple rolled, and his breathing trembled. Layla put the container back on the tray and was about to say something when she saw Bruno reach his arms out to hug her. She quickly sat on the edge of the bed and put her arms around him. His body shook, and she felt his warm tears against her skin, soaking her blouse and hair. Bruno sobbed, and his chest heaved up and down as Layla calmly rubbed his back to soothe and comfort him. It's okay. Let it go now. Release your pain. Everything will be all right. I promise you. Our future is rosy. Bruno tried to choke back his tears. And bright. Layla laughed softly and began to cry. Yeah, rosy and bright. It's going to be okay. I'm here for you. She didn't ask him questions or bring up what had happened. Instead, she held him tightly and repeated that everything would be all right. Bruno eventually calmed down and took long, deep breaths to compose himself. His eyes were swollen and red, but the sadness in them was gone, and a flicker of life had started to shine in them again. The release of emotions had exhausted him, and he soon fell fast asleep. Layla stayed by his side all through the night. She had told Zoe about what had happened, and her mother had told her to spend as much time with him as possible. Zoe had practically raised Bruno and knew he struggled to express his emotions with words. She also knew that his heart was pure and that he was a good person. She had never forgotten the day when Oliver had eventually found her and Layla. Bruno had been about 9 or 10 years old, and he had stood before her to block Oliver from getting to Layla. That night, Nurse Sharon brought a spare bed for Layla to sleep on. She set it beside Bruno's bed. Layla couldn't sleep, so she held his hand and quietly gazed at him. Her tension began to fade, and she finally felt at peace again. The sun rose over the horizon, and its bright rays of light shone through the gaps in the curtains of Bruno's hospital room. Layla woke up and felt his gaze on her. The dullness in his eyes had gone, and he looked at her tenderly. It also seemed as if he wanted to say something. She leaned closer and smiled. What is it? He blinked and opened his mouth and then closed it again. He didn't know how to get the words in his mind into a coherent sentence. It was as if he had forgotten how to talk. Layla patted his arm lightly. It's okay. Tell me when you're ready. I'll wait for you. He nodded and sighed. He had experienced so many emotions over the last few days that he didn't know how to express them anymore. All he knew was that Layla's warmth and love had given him the will to live again. She had given him the chance of a second life. His first life was in the past. His mother, his bullies, and his attempted suicide were behind him now, and he could stand tall again. He had decided to tell Layla everything, the good and the bad. He would give her the truth and hold nothing back. It would be her choice what to make of it. And if she chose to love him, or if she decided to leave him, he would accept it. Bruno hadn't been able to walk properly since he had been poisoned, and the shock of his attempted suicide had left his body weak. Layla carefully helped him climb out of bed and felt his body press against hers as she put his arm around her shoulders to support him. Although he had lost a lot of weight, he was still much bigger than her, but she stood firm, as if his courage to face the world depended on her. Nurse Sharon fetched a wheelchair and asked Layla to take him outside for fresh air and sunlight. Layla pushed him along the gravel pathway in the hospital garden and stopped when they reached a stone bench. She parked his wheelchair alongside the bench so they could sit beside one another and look over a small pond. Bruno tried to talk, but his voice croaked, and he took a deep breath. He cleared his throat and turned to look at her. "I have something to tell you." Layla nodded. She knew he was about to explain what had happened and suddenly felt nervous. "You can tell me anything. I'll listen." Bruno's hands trembled and he felt anxious, realizing that what he was about to tell her could change everything for them. He inhaled and exhaled slowly to calm his nerves. "After I dropped you off at home that night, I went back to my place and opened the package that had been delivered. I had been expecting gym equipment, but when I opened the parcel, I discovered something else." Layla's eyes widened and she listened nervously. She remembered a horrible smell coming from his house when she had stopped there to look for him. He reached out and took her hand in his. "Please, don't get frightened when I tell you, but it's unpleasant." She nodded. "I opened the box and, to my horror, I saw the rotten corpse of my mother's dog, Blackie. I grew up with Blackie. He was already old. There was also a laptop in the box that had once belonged to my biological father." Layla's hands began to shake, and she tried to calm herself. She couldn't imagine who could be so evil as to send someone a vile package. She waited for him to continue. "My biological father was Terry Dunn. He was a monster." Bruno's hands tightened around hers, and his voice trembled. "He took a liking to your mother, but he tricked her, and he almost raped her. But she retaliated, and he got angry, so he arranged for someone to attack your grandmother, and she ended up being paralyzed because of the assault. Your mother agreed to be a surrogate for Oliver because she needed to pay for your grandmother's surgery. Your father agreed to pay for all of the medical bills and her rehabilitation." He rambled everything in one breath without stopping, and by the time he had finished, the color had drained from his face, and he was deathly pale. He didn't know how Layla would react. She didn't say anything, visibly shocked. She opened her mouth to say something, but stopped. Bruno continued. "After I opened the package, I got a message from one of the Healy brothers. They said they would do the same to you as what they had done to Blackie. They also threatened to tell you about my father." Layla's eyes went wide, and then it dawned on her. "So that's why you decided to break up with me and hire an escort to pretend to be your new girlfriend?" Bruno frowned. "How did you know that?" Layla gave him a half shrug. "I was distraught, and it took me a long time to calm down. But when I did, I realized something wasn't adding up. My father and Reggie were overseas at the time, so I had to wait for them to return before I could confirm my suspicions. When they got back, I asked Reggie to help me investigate." She looked directly into his eyes with a solemn expression. "Whatever your father did has nothing to do with you. You're not responsible for his behavior, and it's not your fault." Bruno looked away and grimaced. "You don't understand. I'm tainted because of him. His dirty blood runs through my veins." Layla shook her head. "No, you are who you are and not who he was. I hate that he did that to my mother, but he's dead now, and whatever evil he brought into the world died with him." She sighed and squeezed his hand. "Bruno, you don't have to fear the Healys and their threats. My father is one of the most powerful and feared men in Cuba. He'll keep us safe." Bruno felt his chest tightened and looked at her with fear in his eyes. "No one can guarantee our safety forever. You don't know what they did, and you don't know what they're capable of." He paused again, and his voice became soft. "When I buried Blackie..." "What happened to Blackie? Didn't he die of old age?" Bruno shook his head. She gasped. "They poisoned him?" Tears rolled down Bruno's cheeks, and Layla understood what he had been trying to say. She was stunned. It was too terrible. They would always have to look over their shoulders and be wary of whatever they ate or drank. No one would have been able to keep them safe. She felt their hearts sink. Bruno wiped his face with the back of his hand. "Yeah, they poisoned Blackie, and they roamed free. They threatened to harm the only two people in this world who had ever shown me love. I had to protect you and your mother." He took a deep breath. "Layla, I had to do something. That's why I chased you away. I made you think I was cheating on you for a reason. I had to create distance between us. But there's more." Layla's heart began to beat faster. She thought about the poisoned dog and the poisoned Healy's, and a chill ran down her spine. I went to the dinner party at the Healy's mansion with a vial of poison in my pocket. Layla looked up at the bright sun in the sky, and all the puzzle pieces fell into place. Layla clasped Bruno's hand and felt his cold, sweaty palm. Her eyes were glossy with tears. Bruno didn't say anything for a long time and stared into the distance. He finally exhaled slowly and continued. They bullied me for 20 years. I didn't want them to turn on you and our future children. That's all I could think about at the time. He felt his skin prickle. I made a toast, and we all drank the poisoned rum. They drank about 3 or 4 glasses, and I had only 2. It didn't take long for the poison to take effect, and we all collapsed. Layla didn't know how to feel, but her heart ached for Bruno. She understood why he had done what he did, but the thought of the 4 brothers dying made her uncomfortable. She pondered for a while before asking, "What about Isabella?" Bruno shrugged and he looked at the ground. I don't know how she got poisoned. I suspect one of the brothers chatted to her and gave her a sip of their drink. It was a rare vintage rum, so maybe she wanted to taste it. He looked up at her again and choked back his tears. I killed my mother. That wasn't supposed to happen. I couldn't deal with it, so I tried to kill myself. Layla squeezed his hand in hers. It's not your fault. I'm sure you would never have done it if you had known that she would drink the poisoned rum. Bruno shook his head adamantly. No, definitely not. She leaned over and hugged him. Don't blame yourself. She couldn't imagine the emotional turmoil he must have been going through. He gazed into her eyes. After I tried to kill myself, one of the nurses came to talk to me. She told me she had been there when I was born. She saw my mother tried to suffocate me. She stopped her and saved my life. I was just a newborn, barely a day old. Until you visited me, I wondered if I was worth anything. My mother didn't want me, and my cousins detested me. I really felt like I was a waste of a life. So why was I alive? Layla shook her head. You're not worthless. You being alive is everything to me. You're the best person I know. You've been my protector ever since I can remember. You may not care about anyone else, but I know you care about me, and I've always known that. Layla, you don't understand. I'm not a good person. I kill people. I didn't mean to kill my mother, but I murdered the Healy brothers with a cold heart, and it was easy. There were no surveillance cameras mounted on the patio walls, so no one could ever be able to say it was me. The police even said they didn't suspect me because I was also poisoned, and I nearly died from it. But that doesn't mean I'm off the hook. Maybe something will come to light many years from now. I can't guarantee that won't happen. Layla's face paled, and she shivered. That's the truth of what happened. This is me now. You must make of it what you want. I can't offer you the life I once promised you. You'll have to decide whether you want to stay with me or not. I want you to live a happy, carefree life, and I can't give that to you anymore. She let go of her hand. You'd better go now. Layla gazed down at her empty hand and didn't know how to react. He smiled at her. My darling Layla, go now. The nurse will come to fetch me. Please, be careful on your way home. She nodded, but she was in a daze and was confused. She stood up and smoothed her skirt before slowly turning around to leave. Bruno watched her walk away. He didn't show his emotions, but he realized that the scariest thing wasn't death. It was losing her. He watched her disappear into the distance and felt the darkness envelop him again. The heaviness returned, and his world became dead silent. He didn't expect anything from life anymore. He told himself that life was cruel, and it showed no remorse. He sighed and stared blankly as he accepted his fate. Rebecca had returned to the Air Force Academy following her volunteer mission to the small island of Martinique. The hurricane had destroyed several seaside villages and had left a trail of destruction in its wake. Many people had gone missing or died, and the event had caused a stir on an international scale. 3 classmates of Rebecca's had also volunteered, and they were relieved to see each other again. They had a newfound appreciation for their privileged lives. Although the semester hadn't started, the Academy offered auxiliary programs to students who wanted to expand their skills. Rebecca and her classmates went to the sports field, ready to start one of the auxiliary programs. Much to her surprise, she noticed Kyle and another man on the sports field beside the instructor. The instructor waited for the excited students to settle down and greeted them. "Welcome to our special training module. I'd like to introduce the instructors who will be conducting the training." The 2 men stepped forward. They were wearing military fatigues and came across as solid and disciplined. Rebecca immediately recognized Kyle. She hadn't expected to see him so soon. Her eyes lit up and she smiled, waiting for him to step closer. The instructor pointed to the other young man first. "This is Lieutenant Zach Lewis. He's a technical department specialist and will focus mainly on the theoretical aspects." Zach nodded and smiled. He looked friendly and kind. The instructor then gestured at Kyle. "This is Captain Gonzalez. He's a qualified Air Force pilot and has a tight schedule. We're lucky to have some of his time. He'll take you through the practical aspects." The students smiled enthusiastically and saluted their 2 new trainers. Rebecca looked at Kyle and felt her skin tingle. She could tell he wanted to approach her, but held back. Zach spoke first. "Good morning. I hope you will learn something during the next 2 weeks and that you enjoy the experience." Kyle waited for him to finish before he greeted the students. "It's good to see so many eager young faces this morning. It takes discipline and dedication to become an Air Force pilot. Let me just warn you that the next couple of weeks aren't going to be easy." The students nodded and gazed at Zach and Kyle with admiration. Zach proceeded to go over the course outline before starting the theory classes. The students would only begin combat training in the afternoon. The training stopped at midday so that everyone could take a short lunch break. Rebecca sat in the canteen to eat. She turned around and saw Kyle and Zach walk in. Kyle looked straight ahead and ignored her. She knew it was inappropriate to talk to him, so she looked away and focused on her lunch when she noticed someone standing before her. It was another student named Clayton. He held his tray and smiled at her with perfect white teeth. He looked slightly embarrassed. "Hi, Rebecca. Do you mind if I join you?" Rebecca had seen him around and knew who he was, but she didn't think he had been waiting for an opportunity to talk to her. She looked up at him and smiled. "Sure, no problem." Clayton sat down and hesitated before saying, "My cousin visited yesterday and brought some treats. I don't eat them, so I wondered if you'd like some." He handed a small gift bag to her. "Girls love sweet things, so please take it and share it with your roommates." Rebecca smiled. "That's kind of you, but I don't eat sweet things much either." Clayton wasn't ready to give up and trying to persuade her. "My roommates won't eat them, and I don't know many girls. Please take it. If you and your friends don't like treats, just throw them away." Rebecca didn't want to hurt his feelings, seeing as he was so insistent. She politely took the small gift bag and put it beside her tray. "Thanks. That's kind of you. I'm sure a few girls in my dorm will enjoy them." Clayton's eyes lit up. "Yeah? That's great." Meanwhile, on the opposite side of the canteen, Zach noticed Kyle frowning. "Hey, what's up with you?" Kyle turned his eyes away from Rebecca and Clayton and forced a chuckle. "Nothing." Zach looked over his shoulder and then back at Kyle. "Didn't you say that girl you like is here?" He nodded his head in Rebecca's direction. "Is she the pretty one sitting over there? Why don't you introduce us?" Kyle gave him a half shrug. "Yeah, maybe later this afternoon." Zach grinned at him, and they ate their lunch in silence. After Rebecca had finished eating, Clayton stood up. He leaned over and reached his hand out to take her tray. "Give that to me. I need to return my tray in any case." She laughed. "You're such a gentleman. Thanks." Clayton didn't expect her to compliment him, and his ears turned red. She smiled and teased him. "Those who don't know any better would think you're flirting with me." Clayton's neck and face also turned red, and although he felt flustered, he quickly answered without skipping a beat. I am flirting with you. She didn't know what to say, but realized she couldn't lead him on. You're sweet, but I'm not interested in dating. I want to focus on my training first. She picked up the gift bag and held it out to him. You should probably take this back. Clayton felt rejected, but he wasn't easily discouraged. No, keep it. I don't mind waiting for you. I guess I'll see you around. She nodded as he spun around with the trays in his hands. Rebecca shrugged helplessly. She had rejected countless men since she had started at the academy. As she walked away, she felt someone's gaze on her, and she turned her head to see a young man in military fatigue staring at her. He was leaning against the wall and had a lazy look in his eyes. He looked at the bag in her hands and raised his eyebrows. She walked over to him and smiled. Captain Gonzalez, would you like to try one of these sweets? A classmate of mine gave them to me. Kyle glanced at the bag and then reached out to take it. Thanks. I like sweet things. The corner of his lips curled into a subtle grin. You don't mind if I eat all of it, do you? She felt butterflies in her tummy and couldn't believe he would flirt like that. You're a bit greedy, don't you think? He nodded. Yeah. Then he inched closer and looked in her eyes. Maybe. Their eyes locked, and Rebecca could sense his desire for her. She felt her cheeks turn pink. I get gifts all the time. You should come to my dorm and I'll give you more. Besides, I can't eat everything by myself. Kyle's eyes shone. You're very brave. Rebecca blinked. And why is that? A mischievous smile appeared on his face. What other gifts do you like? She blushed but didn't reply. He chuckled softly. Sit with me at dinner tonight. Zach wants to meet you, and since he'll be teaching you theory, being on friendly terms with him will be useful. He's brilliant, but not as good at combat as I am. Rebecca nodded and composed herself. Thank you. I'll ask Lieutenant Lewis if I need help with anything I don't understand. Kyle stood up straight. Yeah, it's going to be a long afternoon, so you should get some rest before we resume the training session. How about you? Are you going to rest? I'm the instructor. I have to keep up appearances. Rebecca flashed a coy smile. You better not let the other students think you're giving me preferential treatment. He stared into her eyes. You're not just a student. She caught his gaze and held it. Oh, what am I? He smiled. You're my girl. Rebecca returned to her dormitory feeling a little embarrassed by Kyle having called her his girl. The guy's unbelievable. He can't stop himself. But I have to admit, it does feel pretty good. She smiled to herself and decided she would take Kyle up on his suggestion and go and take a short rest. Later that afternoon, when Kyle's training session began, Rebecca knew that it was going to be a tough exercise. The male students took one look at the obstacle course and they all started to complain about how hard it looked. As for her, if she was going to have any chance of completing the course within the allotted time, she would first have to recall the theoretical knowledge she had learned from Zach that morning and put it into practice. The male students each took their turns and completed the course with some difficulty. Then it was Rebecca's turn. The men returned to the starting line and began to cheer her on. First, she ran through each obstacle in her mind. Then, she took a deep breath and started the course. She pushed herself hard until she reached the final stage. She was so exhausted that she could barely keep going. She was one of only 2 women in the class, and it seemed to her at first that the course had been designed with only the men in mind. She felt annoyed, but then she remembered that even some of the guys had struggled with it, while the other girl, who had once been an elite athlete, had managed to finish the obstacle course in good time. Even though Rebecca had trained every day, she was no athlete, but she was determined to complete the course. She looked up at the 9-foot-tall wall in front of her and groaned. I've got no strength left to climb that. Just then, she heard a voice behind her. Let me help you, Becky. Rebecca was surprised to see Kyle there, especially when he crouched down for her to jump on his back. Come on, hop up. She laughed incredulously. Are you serious?
Sure. Everyone else is back at the starting line. No one will see us.
He reached out his hand, and then he helped her onto his back.
Hold on tight.
He stood up slowly. Rebecca wrapped her arms around his neck, and he set off to help her complete the remainder of the course. He moved quickly, but there was never a moment she didn't feel secure. She felt his taut back muscles ripple with every step he took. He climbed the wall effortlessly, and before long, they reached the top. He grabbed the rope, and together, they slid down the other side of the wall to the ground. From there, he ran to the timer with her still on his back and pressed the button. Rebecca was relieved to have reached the end of the course, albeit with Kyle's assistance.
Thank you, Captain Gonzalez.
He felt her hot breath in his ear, and a thrill of excitement rippled along his spine. Then, he gently helped her off his back. The obstacle course had been completed, and it was time to return to the starting line. Rebecca took a couple of steps, but she still felt exhausted. Kyle walked beside her.
Still tired?
Yeah, that's one tough course, and I'm not much of an athlete. Without warning, he crouched down and picked her up again.
If you're tired, then I'll carry you back.
She was in no mood to argue, and she wrapped her arms around his neck again. She rested her head on his shoulder, and she thought she could make out the steady beat of his heart. You're going to tire yourself out if you give everyone a lift. Kyle stared straight ahead with a serious look on his face.
No, I won't. I only offer this service to my special girl.
Rebecca smiled, and her heart soared. While they were still out of the sight of the others, he put her down and stroked her hair. Go to your dorm and take a shower. Then you can join Zach and I for dinner. We'll go out.
Sounds good. And thanks again.
The two of them separated, and Rebecca walked slowly back in the direction of the starting line. When her classmates saw her approaching, they all went over to make sure she was all right.
You look exhausted, Rebecca. Let me help you.
Are you thirsty? I've got a fresh bottle of water here. Let me open it for you.
Do you want me to help you over to the bench so you can rest for a while?
Kyle, who had already arrived back, frowned when he heard the other men fawning over her.
That bunch of brats. Looks like today's training wasn't tough enough for them. How did they still have the energy to pander to someone?
He clapped his hands to attract their attention, and they all stopped what they were doing and stood to attention. Today's training is over. Everyone, disband and get a good sleep. Tomorrow's task is going to be even more difficult than today's.
Yes, sir.
They all spoke in unison, and then they began to disperse. Clayton ran up to Rebecca.
If it's too much for you, I can talk to the instructor for you, if you like.
Clayton felt that Kyle could be a brute at times. He looked up at the other man and caught him staring straight back at him. The coldness in his eyes shattered Clayton's soul, and he shivered. But Clayton was just a student, and Kyle was an experienced pilot who had been engaged in real-life battles. The anger that the younger man had felt a moment earlier subsided, and he smiled kindly at Rebecca.
Or maybe you should ask him to go easy on you. I guess he could just be a little more accommodating.
Rebecca smiled sweetly back at him. There's no need for that. I'm as strong as any man, and I'll be fine. But thanks for your concern. She glanced over at Kyle, and then she returned to her room with her female classmate. The day's training activities had exhausted her. She took a long, hot shower, dried her hair, and lay down on her bed. Just as she was about to fall asleep, her phone beeped with a text message, bringing her back to her senses. It was from Kyle. He said he would see her downstairs in half an hour. Rebecca slid off the bed and picked up her dirty clothes from the floor. She was going out for dinner, so she thought it would be nice to put on some flattering clothes for a change. She couldn't remember a time when she had gone out with Kyle and hadn't been wearing her flying uniform. When was the last time I wore a dress? She picked out a white dress from her closet, put it on, and looked at her reflection in the mirror. She felt as if something was missing, so she opened her jewelry box. Before starting at the Air Force Academy, she used to regularly wear a jade pendant around her neck. But for safety reasons, wearing jewelry was strictly forbidden in the academy, so she hadn't bothered to take it with her. The only item that she had
was the bracelet that Reggie had given her. She took the bracelet out of the jewelry box and took a long time putting it on her wrist. The clasp was tricky to do up without help. She looked in the mirror again and was satisfied with the way she looked. It was still a little early to meet Kyle, so she tied her hair up in a high ponytail and then flipped through the news on her phone until it was time to go. After a while, her phone vibrated. She thought the message was from Kyle, so she was surprised to see a text from one of her senior students from another department. The senior, Leo Hansford, was also a member of the student union, so they had met on several occasions. Leo's message said that there was something he wanted to discuss with her and that he would wait for her downstairs. Rebecca checked her watch. It was about time to go, so she put on her shoes and took the stairs down to the lobby. She saw Leo shuffling from one foot to the other nervously. He was holding something in his hand. When Leo spotted her, his eyes widened. She was a vision in white. He had never seen her in civilian clothes, and as the setting sun shrouded her with its last rays of light, he thought she looked stunning. She walked toward him with a broad smile. "Hey, Leo, what did you want to speak to me about? Is it something to do with the student union?" Leo shook his head and wiped a sweaty palm on the legs of his pants. He was usually such a calm and composed person, but at that moment, he had never felt so nervous. He pursed his lips and took a deep breath to steady his nerves. Then, he handed her the object in his hand. "This is for you." Rebecca was puzzled, and she looked at the object curiously. It was a book of maps with basic information about various fighter planes. She had seen it before and had tried to get a hold of a copy, but the bookstore was always out of stock. She was delighted to be given a copy, and she grinned at Leo. "Oh, I've been trying to get my hands on a copy of this for ages. Where did you get it? Do you have one yourself?" "Yeah, I have an older edition. Take it and have a good look at it. There's something inside you should see." "Thank you so much. How much was it? I'll transfer the money to you later." "Oh, there's no need for that." He waved his hand dismissively. "It's a gift. Let's just call it a birthday present." "But it's not my birthday." "Whatever. You'll have one soon enough, I guess." He paused, and Rebecca chuckled. "Now, don't forget to flip through it properly." He was eager to remind her of that. "I will. Thanks again. I'll see you later." Rebecca expected him to walk away, but he seemed reluctant to leave. Instead, he gazed into her eyes. "You look really beautiful tonight." And then he left. She watched him go, wondering why he had specifically told her to look through it properly. She shook her head in bewilderment, and then she realized it was time to meet Kyle. It was quiet on campus. Most of the students hadn't yet returned from the holidays, so it didn't take Rebecca long to spot Kyle leaning against a tree. She walked over to him. "Hey, how long have you been there?" "May I?" He took the book from her hands and flipped through it until a folded piece of paper fell out. He picked up the piece of paper and opened it with a half smile. Rebecca was surprised to see the folded paper fall out of the book. "So that's why Leo kept insisting that I look through the book. Is it a love letter? I can't believe a senior like Leo would like me." Kyle opened the letter and swept his gaze over it. She wanted to snatch it out of his hands to see it for herself, but as she went to grab it, he pulled it away and held it over her head, just out of her reach. She stood on her tiptoes, but still couldn't reach it. She started to feel annoyed with him, and she jumped up to take the letter. But she forgot that she was wearing high heels, and she slipped and fell into Kyle's arms. He held her with one hand and the letter with his others. "You're so enthusiastic today." Rebecca was vexed, and she pushed him away. "Give me that letter." Kyle smirked at her. "But I, as the instructor, have stipulated that relationships between students are forbidden. I'm afraid I have to confiscate this love letter." Rebecca frowned and placed her hands on her hips. "I'm 18 years old. That makes me an adult, so I'm capable of making my own decisions." "Is that so?" Kyle's eyes darkened. "Do you want to date that guy?" She hadn't expected to be interrogated by him. "No, I don't. But that's not the point. That letter belongs to me. But I've confiscated it, and you know why. He put the love letter in his pocket without any sense of guilt. Let's go. She glared at him angrily, and then they walked off together with Kyle still holding the book. The car's parked just over there. Zach's waiting for us inside. We're going to a restaurant off campus. Rebecca climbed into the car, and Kyle got in beside her. They greeted Zach, who was sitting in the driver's seat. Because the two men were instructors, they were allowed to leave the academy whenever they wanted. Kyle chose a local restaurant, and the three of them found a private room. Only then was Kyle able to formally introduce Rebecca and Zach to each other, and they shook hands politely. Lieutenant Lewis, if I come across anything I don't understand, can I come and ask you? Zach was a down-to-earth kind of man who didn't go in for airs and graces when he was off duty. Please, just call me Zach when I'm not working. And yes, feel free to come to me at any time. Great. Thanks, Zach. Rebecca liked the man already. Zach's going to be around a fair bit from now on, Kyle said. So if you can't find me, he'll be happy to help you out if you encounter any difficulties. You can also ask my cousin Pedro. Why don't you invite Pedro over for dinner sometime? Kyle's eyes widened in a look of incredulity. Are you kidding me? Why would I want to hang out with a guy like him? She had forgotten that he didn't like his cousin very much. She could hear the deep dislike in his voice. Later, when Rebecca went to the bathroom, Kyle and Zach were able to have a private conversation. So Kyle, tell me honestly, do you see her as a younger sister, or is there more to it? What do you think? Kyle grinned at his friend. Zach grinned back and nodded knowingly. Do you ever go anywhere without picking up a girlfriend? Just then, Rebecca returned to the table, and the two men quickly changed the subject. The atmosphere during the meal was pleasant. After they had all finished eating, Zach drove them both back to the academy because Rebecca had another big day the next day, and she needed to get a good night's sleep. Kyle walked her to her dorm room. It was a dark, moonless night, and under the dim streetlights, her face looked eerily enchanting. You look really beautiful tonight. It was the second time she had been praised for her beauty that evening. And you look very handsome. He looked at her suspiciously. Do you really mean that, or are you just trying to make me feel good about myself? I mean it. Her tone was calm and serious. Do people often randomly give you gifts? She shrugged by way of response and changed the topic. Did you enjoy tonight's special? Their eyes locked, and he scowled. I actually thought it was a little sour. She stared at him in bemusement. Is he talking about dinner or me? She decided it was time to leave before he said something they might both regret. In that case, I'd advise you not to snatch my gifts in the future. Good night. As she turned to leave, he grabbed her wrist and spun her around to face him. As he held her wrist, he noticed her bracelet, and he let her go. That's pretty. She glanced down at the piece of jewelry. It's the only one I have here. We're not allowed to wear jewelry at the academy. An old classmate of mine gave it to me. Actually, you met him. Kyle looked at her quizzically, and she remembered how jealous he had been when he and Reggie had met. You remember Reggie? You met him in Martinique. She enjoyed the taunt. He lifted her wrist and took another look at the bracelet. Then, to her astonishment, he took it off. You know the Air Force Academy doesn't allow students to wear jewelry, Becky. You don't want to get caught with this, so I'd better take it. Her eyes widened, and she gaped at him in disbelief. You'd better go and get a good night's sleep. Big day tomorrow. She gritted her teeth with frustration and irritation. I'm going to get back at you for this. She snatched the book from his hand and stomped upstairs. Kyle watched her disappear, and then he put her bracelet in his pocket and returned to the car, where Zach was waiting for him. I want to go back downtown. But we just came from there. Zach was puzzled. Yeah, I want to go buy something. I'll drop you off at the dormitory, and then I'll head out. A half hour later, Kyle walked into a high-end jewelry store. It was late in the evening, and the shopping mall was preparing to close. The staff didn't usually get such late-night customers. Kyle's presence filled the store, and the sales assistant jumped to her feet.
"Can I help you, sir?"
"I'm after a gift for my girlfriend." Kyle spoke concisely and confidently.
"Absolutely. I have some I can recommend. Are you looking for a necklace or a bracelet?"
"A full set."
The sales assistant's eyes lit up. She walked to a back cabinet, unlocked it, and took out a tray. "This is a limited edition range of our most popular brand. It was designed by a famous jewelry designer, and there are only 10 sets in the world. It includes a necklace, earrings, a bracelet, and a ring. It's aimed at younger women. What do you think?" Kyle looked closely at the pieces the woman presented to him. He carefully picked up the necklace and examined it. Under the bright lights of the store, the combination of platinum and diamonds was exquisite.
"I'll take it."
The saleswoman tried to hide her excitement. It wasn't often that she got to sell an entire set of jewelry. "Of course, sir. Please wait a moment while I wrap them up." She took the jewelry to the counter and boxed up each piece individually. Kyle waited patiently with one hand in his pocket. The sales assistant placed the final box into the bag, and then she tallied up the cost. Kyle swiped his credit card to pay without batting an eyelid at the thousands of dollars he had just spent. He took the gift bag and left the store just as they were closing up for the night. He drove back to the Air Force Academy and decided to go to Rebecca's room before returning to his own. He sat in the car outside her room and stared at her curtained window on the second floor. He took out his phone and checked his social media. Rebecca had posted an update just 5 minutes earlier. So she's still awake. His face lit up, and without thinking, he dialed her number. Rebecca was sitting on her bed in her pajamas, checking social media updates, when her phone rang. She was surprised to get a call so late in the evening. "Kyle!" "I'm downstairs. Can you come down for a minute?" Rebecca was puzzled. What does he want at this time of night? She took her phone and padded softly to the balcony so as not to wake her roommate. She looked down and saw Kyle leaning nonchalantly against the front of the car with his long legs outstretched. He held his phone to his ear with one hand, and he seemed to be holding something else in his other hand. She strained her eyes to see what it was, but in the darkness, it was impossible to tell. He seemed to sense her looking down at him, and he looked up and saw her on the balcony. They locked eyes, and he asked her again to go downstairs. He moved away from the car and walked toward her building. As he did so, he walked under the street lamp, and his face was momentarily illuminated in a warm orange glow. Rebecca had still been feeling annoyed with Kyle after his earlier behavior, but her heart softened at the sight of him. "Okay, I'll be right down." She didn't want to go downstairs in her pajamas, so she changed back into her white dress, and then she took the stairs to the front door. She found him standing just outside, and he seemed taller than he had earlier. And that's when she realized she was still wearing her slippers. She hoped he wouldn't notice. "What are you doing here?" He removed one of the gift boxes from the bag and opened it. Inside was the most beautiful necklace Rebecca had ever seen. Hanging from a fine chain was a pure platinum pendant in the shape of a flower with intricate petals. The center of the flower was inlaid with a cluster of diamonds, and even under the dim lights of the dormitory building, it was dazzling. She gasped with astonishment as Kyle undid the clasp and hung it around her neck, carefully moving her long hair out of the way. She felt the coolness of the metal against her chest. It was in stark contrast to the masculine heat emitting from his body as he stood close behind her and did up the clasp. Whether he meant it to happen or not, his fingers lightly brushed over her neck as he straightened her hair up, and she felt a shiver throughout her body. He went back around to admire the necklace and smile with satisfaction. "It looks good on you." Even though there was no longer any physical contact between them, she could still feel his presence on her body. Then, to her surprise, he removed another box from his bag. He opened it to reveal the most stunning pair of earrings. They, too, were made of platinum, and they were in the shape of a flower. In the center of each was a single sparkling diamond. They matched the necklace perfectly. Kyle carefully took out one of the earrings
and then he took a step forward and inserted it into the tiny hole in her earlobe. He had never looked so closely at her earlobe before, and he realized how small and delicate it was. It was all he could do to stop himself from nibbling it. It was the first time he had put an earring on anyone, and he was afraid that his hands, which were more used to piloting fighter jets, would be too rough and would hurt her. The two of them were so close that Rebecca could hear his breathing. She could even feel his breath lightly brushing her cheek. She didn't move. She stood rooted to the spot with her eyes fixed on his face. She could see the concentration in it as he carefully put the second earring into her other earlobe. She had seen him fly an airplane in battle and fire at an enemy, but she had never before seen him look as focused as he was at that moment. Once the second earring was safely and securely in place, Kyle seemed to breathe a sigh of relief, as if he had completed the most strenuous task. He stood back to admire the earrings, and again, he smiled with satisfaction. He and Rebecca locked eyes, and she imagined she could feel the air around them heating up. She tensed up and wished Kyle would do something to ease the awkwardness that existed between them at that moment. I was angry with him earlier, she thought, and I really wanted to get him back for what he did. But now I feel the complete opposite. Instead of feeling annoyed with him, she felt her heart pounding in her chest as he gazed into her eyes. How does he have this effect on me? I want to be strong, but he just makes me feel weak. And all the while, he's in complete control and looking like he's done this a million times before. Throughout the entire interaction, Kyle remained completely calm. His face was firmly set, and even his breathing remained steady, while hers was erratic. They look really good on you. Rebecca touched her new jewelry with admiration and was about to speak when Kyle extracted yet another box from the bag. Inside that one was a matching bracelet, and it was just as stunning as the necklace and earrings. She gasped in amazement, but before she could say anything, he lifted her left hand. The left hand is closer to the heart, Becky. There was that smooth, silky voice again that she loved. It was like honey running over her skin, and it gave her shivers. He removed the bracelet from his box and clasped it around her wrist. He took his time, as if he didn't want the moment to end, and he was savoring every second. Then, he held her hand up so that they could both admire the bracelet. Just like the other pieces, it featured a flower-shaped charm with a small cluster of diamonds in the center. The lamp from the streetlight landed on the diamonds, and they sparkled brightly. Rebecca had to admit that it was really beautiful. He gazed at her for what felt like a long time, and her entire body seemed to sparkle with diamonds. Then, he handed the gift back to her. There's one more thing inside. I'll leave you to open it when you get back to your room. Rebecca felt stunned by his lavish generosity, but she couldn't help but wonder what it was all about. Why are you giving me all this jewelry, Kyle? So that you won't fall in love. He stared deep into her eyes as he spoke. Unless it's with me. She was dumbstruck, and the world around her fell silent. All she could hear was the beating of her own heart. Did he just tell me he's in love with me? Rebecca felt her whole body heat up, and she hoped he wouldn't notice her blushing face. The gifts he had lavished on her were expensive, and he obviously wouldn't have given them to her for no reason. But his actions seemed somewhat extreme. In her experience, most men would simply say something like, I like you. Do you want to be my girlfriend? But an entire set of diamond-encrusted jewelry was more than anything she could ever have expected. As she was mulling over his true intentions, he interrupted her thoughts. From now on, you're not allowed to receive gifts from any other boys. If you want anything, just let me know, and I'll buy it for you. She guessed he was talking about the bracelet Reggie had given her. But Reggie insisted on giving me that, so what could I do? Didn't want to hurt his feelings. Besides I'd be jealous. Rebecca's heart was still beating fast, and she wished she had better control over it. It wasn't the first time someone had declared their love for her. She was only 18 years old, but it had happened countless times already. So why am I reacting like a pathetic little child? She caught sight of her new bracelet, and a thought occurred to her. Reggie didn't give me that bracelet for nothing, you know. Kyle gave her a questioning look, so she explained. I gave him an intelligent model car in exchange because he said he liked racing. Is that so? Kyle chuckled, but there was a hint of danger in his tone. So what are you going to give me? Rebecca couldn't think of anything, and she wished she hadn't mentioned the exchange. Can you give me your future? The look in his eyes was deadly serious. Or if you're not ready to date yet, I'll wait for you. But if you are ready, it has to be me, because I like you, and I can give you the kind of future you want. She stared at him in shock, and her delinquent heart pounded harder than ever, making her feel slightly dizzy. Kyle went on. I need you to promise me something. Then he leaned forward, raised her chin, and planted a kiss on her lips. It only lasted a second, but in that moment, their breathing became one, and her senses were heightened. His lips were soft but firm, and she smelled the familiar scent of his cologne. It reminded her of the times he had carried her on his back, and she had come away with the scent on her hands. Promise me you'll be my future girlfriend. Rebecca didn't know what to say, and she stood rooted to the spot. You'd better go back upstairs and get some sleep. She came back to her senses and nodded. Yeah, I should go. See you in the morning, Becky. See you, Kyle. She turned and walked back inside with her gift bag hanging by her side. Kyle stood and watched her go. A smile slowly formed on his lips. My future girlfriend is so cute. Rebecca went upstairs and touched her lips. The kiss with Kyle hadn't lasted long, but she wanted to savor it. Her heart was still beating fast as she took off her dress and changed back into her pajamas. Once lying in bed, she looked more closely at the jewelry that Kyle had given her. It really was beautiful, and she couldn't tear her eyes away until she remembered that he had confiscated the bracelet that Reggie had given her. She and Reggie were just friends, but Kyle had confiscated it out of jealousy. Kyle's possessive streak was strong and a little overbearing. She hadn't agreed to anything, and yet he had said that she was his future girlfriend. Rebecca was vexed. Why didn't I just say no? She thought. She put it down to the fact that it was because of the kiss. It made her forget everything, and it turned her brain to mush. She was a little annoyed but happy at the same time. She tossed and turned for a long time before she fell asleep. As a result, she yawned her way through Zach's class the next morning and wasn't thrilled to find that Kyle was in ruthless mode for their afternoon training. He had increased the workload again, although he minimized the training program slightly for her and the woman. She realized that he had gauged their fitness well because she and the other woman were almost at their limit by the end. Rebecca had an iron will and refused to admit defeat, but he still managed to zap her of all of her physical strength. He would always wait for her near the finish line to encourage her and help her push through to completion. But she swore to herself that after their current round of training had finished, she would work hard and never make him feel like he had to help her again. When they were all done, the entire class was so spent that they fell to the ground in a silent heap to recover. Kyle was very satisfied with what he saw. He was particularly pleased that none of the men had the energy to talk to Rebecca. It was rare that he was pleased with everyone, and he decided to show it. Today, you can all have a soda at the canteen on me. They were all grateful and showed their appreciation with smiles and nods, because none of them had the strength to express it in any other way. Kyle believed that a great instructor needed to show both kindness and authority, and he vowed to be that instructor for the remaining few days. Since the night that he had bought the jewelry for Rebecca, he had shared many a meal with her, but the confession that had been made was never mentioned again. She seemed happy and relaxed, and was able to pretend that nothing had happened. He wasn't entirely sure where to go from there. On the last day of training for the month, Rebecca received a call from Callum. I'm headed to Bolivia tomorrow. I'll be staying near the academy, so I'll be bringing you some of the wine that you like. The wine that he had referred to was her favorite. It could only be found in New York and was made by a small family. They used a recipe that had been passed down for generations. They didn't produce much and often sold out, so she was excited at the prospect. Thanks. It'll be great to have some after tomorrow's training, and to catch up with you a bit. And a couple of other people you know. Wanda and Reggie are probably coming too. Rebecca was puzzled. Why? I'm coming for a race, and I saw Reggie's name on the list of participants. He qualified at the same level as me. I'll contact him later and see if he wants to travel together. He paused. As for Wanda, her presence is a bit of a secret. Rebecca was somewhat appalled. Wanda's meant to be studying hard. Do her parents know that you've kidnapped her? Well, I don't think it's kidnapping if the person's willing. She admires my driving skills and said she wants to come watch me race. Rebecca chose not to comment on that. All right, I'll tell my instructor that I need to meet you guys after training tomorrow. She knew that she had to find Kyle, but she still felt a bit unsure after the kiss they had shared. It had been many days since then, and she had carried on as if nothing had happened. She decided to send him a message. Are you free? I have something I need to talk to you about. Where are you? Near the library. Stay there. I'm on my way. In no time at all, Rebecca saw him striding over. He had taken a shower and changed into civilian clothes. There were also some water droplets on his newly short hair. The droplets found the angles of his face and dripped down his neck. They dampened his t-shirt and outlined the contours of his muscles very attractively. Aren't you tired? He asked. I thought you'd be back at the dorm resting. I'm actually here to do more research into what Zach taught us this morning. It was very interesting, so I'm looking up some books on the topic. I thought you could come help me find some. Ah, you're a good student, Becky. He reached out and stroked her hair gently. I happen to have a grounding in literature as well as in flying planes and fighting, so I'm on my way to pick up a book too. I'll come with you. Rebecca smiled widely. I do have one other thing I wanted to talk to you about. She looked at him with bright eyes. Callum's coming tomorrow. I would like to know if I can go out and see him after my afternoon training. She knew that she needed both Kyle's car and his permission to leave. Yes, I can take you. He then looked at Rebecca meaningfully. It'd be a good time to meet him. Rebecca was pretty sure that there was a hidden meaning in Kyle's words, but she pretended not to know what it was. Okay, it's a deal. Kyle nodded. Now that that's sorted, let's go and get your books. She briefly explained what she was looking for as they headed to the library, and he helped her pick a few good reads on the subject. He looked solemn as he scanned through some books, and it reminded her of their first shooting practice together. He narrowed it down to one book. He sat it at a table and outlined the order in which she should read the chapters. Ask me about anything that you don't understand. She nodded and looked up at him. Are you ready to head back? I just need to get a few books for myself. He moved off to another area to peruse the shelves, and then he went back. He was carrying some books on finance. Rebecca was very curious when she saw that. Why are you learning about finance? Have you forgotten that I said I would wait for you to join the army, and after that, I would go to work for my father's company? Rebecca blinked mischievously. What if I'm not assigned to your battalion? You will be. He held her gaze firmly until they both looked away to quietly read their books. Rebecca had always been able to stay calm by immersing herself in things. When she threw herself into something she liked, she would forget everything else. She had often thought that after she was finished with active service, she would like to work on the research and development of aircraft. The book she was looking at contained basic information in that field. Before they knew it, the sunset had dyed the sky red, and the clock had inched around to 7 o'clock. Kyle noticed the time and closed his book. It's time to eat. Okay. Rebecca did the same, but she checked the book she was reading out of the library before they left. She was still feeling starry-eyed about what she had been learning. I found a real area of interest. I have a feeling that I'll be taking lots of notes tonight. Kyle nodded. You need to eat to replenish your brain power, though.
She looked at him with mock sadness. Do you think that my brain is not very strong? He shrugged. Maybe. Rebecca's eyes and mouth opened wide as she thought of the best way to retort. He thought she was adorable, but pretended to be serious. Do you know when you're the silliest? She snorted. I'm not stupid at all. Right now. He smiled and leaned into her ear. But why do you care about your instructor's opinion of you? She felt her hackles rising and raised her fist as if to strike. He stomped her fist gently and spoke in a voice that she found quite sensual and impossibly hard to resist. My muscles are too hard. You'll hurt your hand. She ignored him and turned to leave. Kyle followed behind, smiling. The next day, he reduced the training load for the entire class. Rebecca took no notice of his efforts to egg her on and just dug deep to complete the training. Afterward, she showered and changed. When she went downstairs, she noticed that Kyle's car was already parked out in front. She opened the door and climbed in with a smile. Thank you for showing a bit of favoritism. He looked at her sideways. If I'm ever reported in the future, I hope that you'll stand up for me. Otherwise, I might end up sleeping on the streets. Rebecca was feeling happy and didn't bother to argue. She was wearing a knee-high length red skirt that matched her mood, and all of the jewelry that Kyle had given her. When they arrived at the place where they arranged to meet Callum, Rebecca saw him talking and laughing with Wanda. Wanda was several years younger than them and was a high achiever. She had just finished her middle school exams and had gained admission to a key high school in New York City. She was also stunning. Because of Brock's mixed heritage, Wanda had a very unique look. Rebecca didn't know what Callum had said, but Wanda was giggling non-stop. She looked particularly attractive, the dimples on her cheeks forming clearly as she laughed. Callum and Wanda quickly got up when they saw Rebecca, and they noticed Kyle at the same time. Tristan had seen Kyle several times since kindergarten, but Callum had not. He moved toward him to shake hands after the introduction. Jose's big brother. You've gotten better with age. He looked at Rebecca again. You didn't say that I would have to compete for the most handsome man today. I would have put on my battle uniform. The corner of Rebecca's mouth twitched, but Callum had already moved on with the introductions. Kyle, this is Wanda. Wanda, this is Kyle. His brother and I were the best of friends in kindergarten. Wanda smiled sweetly at Kyle as she said hello. As they were getting to know each other, the door to the room they were in opened again. Callum moved toward it. It must be Reggie. I contacted him when I saw the competition register. I hope no one minds him joining us. He opened the door more fully and welcomed a well-dressed Reggie into the fold. It was the first time that Rebecca had seen Reggie dressed so formally, as he usually preferred casual attire. He was even wearing a tie. Callum was also taken aback when he spotted Reggie. He put his arm around his shoulders and pulled him into a hug. You're dressed to impress today. Are you trying to get one over on me already? Do you want me to go easy on you in the finals of the race? He smirked and faked a sigh. It's a pity that I'm not gay. It's wasted on me. Rebecca smothered a laugh, but Wanda didn't hold hers back. She found Callum hilarious. Callum continued the introductions. This is Reggie. He's also a great friend of mine. Since when are they great friends? Rebecca wondered. She thought that the two of them had only met once in Cuba when they had gone parachuting. Reggie looked a little embarrassed. He hadn't been prepared for the introductions. Hello, everyone. He looked at Rebecca and Kyle and smiled. Wanda stood up and held out her hand. Hi, I'm Wanda Porter. Reggie politely shook it. Hello, Miss Porter. Rebecca couldn't help but laugh. Reggie, you don't need to be so polite. You know we all kind of grew up together, right? Okay, Wanda then, he said. Rebecca and Callum looked at each other and smiled. Kyle stood a little to the side of the group and raised his eyebrows slightly at the carry-on. Callum looked at Reggie. What group did you draw for the race? The third. You're lucky because I'm in the first group. If you were in the same group as me, you would have had no chance of winning.
Wanda looked at him in wonder. "Are you the best, Callum?" He nodded and only restrained himself from pinching her cheeks as though she were a sweet little toddler. "When I get first place in the finals in a couple of days, I'll give you the trophy." Her eyes lit up. "Really? I have faith that you can do it. I want that trophy." "We're witnesses to the deal," Rebecca said. "What if you don't manage first place, though? It'll all end in tears." Reggie couldn't keep his eyes off her as she spoke. He had almost refused the dinner invitation when Callum had contacted him the day before. He didn't like lively crowds, and he didn't know Callum, but he had agreed as soon as he had been told that Rebecca would be there. He regretted his decision a little because he found the situation between them impossible and had mixed feelings about seeing her. His gaze kept straying her way, and that was how he spotted the pendant, earrings, and bracelet she was wearing. They appeared to be a set. His hand tightened slightly around his glass as he was transported back to the day that he had put the bracelet on her wrist. He turned to look at Kyle, who was next to her, and an understanding passed between the two men. Reggie couldn't stop himself from asking the question burning in his mind. "Why are you here too?" Kyle looked at him curiously and responded as casual as possible. "I received orders from the army to come over and train Rebecca and her squad." Rebecca nodded vigorously. "If Kyle hadn't been here, I wouldn't have been able to come out now. The academy is very strict on us leaving the base. Why are you here?" She suddenly remembered the answer to her question. "Oh, that's right. I forgot you like racing." Reggie nodded. "After I sat my college entrance exams, I trained for a little bit and felt like I was ready to compete." Rebecca's eyes lit up. "Then you must be good to have passed through the qualifier after only a short period of training." Reggie looked right into those eyes and felt the warmth from them spread through his body. "I've done it before. You can start when you're 16. "It's still not a bad effort. Callum's always liked cars, and I used to spend all my time in the research and development workshop." She looked at him thoughtfully. "By the way, what school did you enroll in?" "The University of Havana." "Ah, it's an awesome place. You're probably a tough student." Reggie was a little embarrassed. "I do all right. I did well in the exam." "Don't be so modest. You're always modest. I never shy away from my achievements, do I, Callum?" She looked at her brother with a smile. Callum looked at her wryly. "It's good to be thick-skinned and know your worth, and it doesn't pay to be too sensitive because it shows." Wanda looked at him in wonder. "Why do you have an answer for everything?" "There's nothing that I don't know." He winked at her. "You can learn a lot from me." Wanda suddenly felt shy. She wanted him to win that trophy for her. The waiter chose that time to serve their meals. He opened the wine that Callum had brought for Rebecca and poured her a glass at his request. Wanda wanted to try it, but Callum intervened. "You're too young to drink." She pouted. "I'm in my first year of high school." "You're still underage." He had his principles. Rebecca watched the interaction and narrowed her eyes as she tasted her wine. It was fragrant and fruity, and she sighed. "It's truly delicious." She lifted her glass to have more, but Kyle touched her wrist to stop the movement. "Perhaps you should eat some food before drinking." Rebecca wasn't thrilled with his suggestion. "Why do you care?" "Well, I'll be the one carrying you home if you get drunk." He removed his hand. "It's up to you. You can drink if you wish." Kyle hadn't spoken much up to that point, and Callum hadn't given his presence too much thought. He looked more closely at Kyle and Rebecca. He gave Kyle a meaningful smile. "I see you two have become quite close." Kyle answered with a slight nod. Opposite him, Reggie seemed to deflate slightly. The atmosphere had changed inexplicably. Rebecca was bemused by the turn things had taken and decided she would have more wine. The wine didn't have the highest alcohol content, but it was potent enough. Rebecca didn't drink much and had a fairly low tolerance for alcohol. So as soon as she felt the effects of that second sip, she put her glass down and pulled the nearest dish toward her. She was about to spoon some onto her plate when someone quickly exchanged the dish for another one.
Reggie looked at her somewhat stiffly. You won't like that one. I think you'll find it won't agree with you. She looked more closely at what he had taken away and was surprised. The dish had olives in it, and she hated olives. How did you know? I saw what you posted on social media a while back. Rebecca grinned. Wow, Reggie, you're so attentive. She happily accepted the other dish that he handed to her. He tried to hide his smile and looked down at his own food. Kyle looked with more interest at Reggie. Wanda hadn't realized that anything was going on and happily helped herself to a variety of food. Callum, on the other hand, was very aware. He glanced at Reggie and then at Kyle. He could sense chaos in the future. Rebecca was sampling the first dish when another small offering appeared in front of her. Kyle had put it there. I heard from Zach this morning that you were dozing off. It sounds like you need more nourishment. Rebecca didn't agree. I just didn't sleep well and was yawning. It's only because I read too late last night. Did you finish the book we picked out? Kyle tried to sound indifferent as he spoke. Do we need to go back to the library tomorrow? No, not yet. There's one part I'm not sure about. I was thinking about it for a long time, and that's why I went to sleep late. What's the specific problem? The radar system. Kyle thought for a second and started to explain in detail to her. He even drew diagrams on a napkin to show what he meant. Rebecca listened carefully and didn't notice the others looking at her at all. She had always been very focused on academia. She was continually captivated by new knowledge, and she was completely immersed in what he was saying, as if there was no one else around. When Kyle finished his explanation, she felt enlightened by her new understanding. So that's how it works. Thanks. He smiled and rubbed her head. If you don't understand something, you can ask me anytime. She nodded and turned back to her dinner to find that another plate had been pushed in front of her. She looked up in confusion. Callum was holding back his laughter, but he tried to speak seriously. Rebecca, you need to give Reggie some attention now. He added that last plate. Perhaps I should join in with another dish? Rebecca blinked and looked up at Reggie. There was no expression on his face as they made eye contact. He looked back down at his own food. Thanks, Reggie. She looked at the biggest platter that was almost empty. It was lucky that you're onto it because I didn't notice Callum stealing all of the sushi so that no one else can have any. I was too focused on learning more. What else do you want to eat? Reggie asked gallantly. She smiled and shook her head. No more. You guys are too kind. You're here to visit me, but you're all taking care of me. I'm a little embarrassed. Wanda spoke up from the other side of the table. I'd like some of that too, Callum. Callum replied in a voice just loud enough to be heard. Women are troublesome creatures. Nevertheless, he passed some to Wanda too, and she smiled broadly at him. Thank you. You're the best. He decided to tease her. Then what kind of reward will you give me? She hadn't expected that and turned pink with embarrassment. What do you want? Callum saw that she was serious, so he leaned closer and spoke for her ears only. You can just owe me. When I think of something, I'll ask you for it. Wanda bit her lip, and her face went from pink to red. Okay. Callum changed the subject. Right. The competition is tomorrow afternoon at 2. Can you come and watch, Rebecca? She felt a little awkward. I have to train tomorrow afternoon. She looked at Kyle after she had finished speaking. You can go if you want. I'll just need to see if I can change the training plan. Rebecca felt her heart lift, and she looked at him questioningly. Don't worry, I'll arrange it, he said. After the competition, I can fly you back to school. Do you know how to fly a plane? Wanda asked. Her eyes were filled with excitement at the thought. Yeah, he knows how to fly a plane, Rebecca said. He taught me to fly. Reggie looked at Kyle. I heard about that incident, Wanda continued. Was that when you were in Colombia? It sounded so dangerous. Yeah, Rebecca thought of everything she had been through in Colombia
and felt a little emotional. "Wanda, promise me you won't ever get yourself in that sort of situation." Reggie didn't know what they were talking about. "Columbia?" Rebecca explained what had happened. "It was the first time I was in the midst of a war." Reggie's hand paused mid-air as he was about to take his next mouthful. "I know." She didn't understand what he meant by that. As the evening wore on, the atmosphere became harmonious again. Because of the race and Rebecca's classes the next day, they didn't stay late. Rebecca was about to open the passenger door of Kyle's car when she was stopped by Reggie. He handed her a bag. "I bought this for you." Surprise registered on her face, and Reggie hurriedly looked away. "See you tomorrow." She smiled. "Good luck with your race. May the best man win." Kyle raised his eyebrows at her once she was inside. "You've received gifts again." She recalled how he had confiscated her other gifts and hurriedly hid the bag behind her. "It's not for you to see." Kyle squinted at Reggie through the car window, but he didn't say anything further. Callum walked over and hooked his arm around Reggie's shoulder to guide him away. "What did you give my sister?" "It's a book." He had heard her say that she wanted a copy, but it was out of print. Zoe had a friend who worked at a publishing house, and she had found it through her contacts. He had taken it with him, even though he hadn't been sure he would see Rebecca on the trip. "Are you after my sister?" Callum asked quietly. Reggie's breathing quickened, but he purposely kept his face blank. "No, I don't want to pursue anyone." He hadn't planned to chase after her because of the tense relationship between their two families, but he couldn't deny that the fight in him had been awakened by seeing how familiar she and Kyle were with each other. "You don't need to hide it." Callum smiled reassuringly. "That stuff between our families is all in the past. If you want to date my sister, I won't object." Reggie didn't answer, but his eyes followed Kyle's car as it disappeared. Callum had been hoping to see a bit of action, but the lack of it, combined with a bit of a headache, indicating to him that the night was definitely at an end, he grabbed Wanda's hand. "Let's go. I'll take you back to the hotel." Wanda nodded and asked him something so quietly he had to strain to hear it. "Callum, do you think Dad will find out that I'm here?" "I wouldn't worry. You've always been so obedient that he wouldn't believe it anyway." Wanda nodded. She had always been very compliant, and it was the first thing rebellious she had done. She felt scared but excited at the same time. The fear won for a while as she thought of her father, so she squeezed Callum's hand tighter for security. It wasn't long after that Kyle and Rebecca arrived back at their base. She was about to head up the stairs with the bag that Reggie had given her when she felt a hand on her shoulder. Rebecca raised her eyes to meet Kyle's. He was looking at her very seriously, causing her heart to skip a beat. "Becky, remember our promise." She didn't say anything, although she wanted to clarify that she hadn't actually promised him anything. When she didn't speak, Kyle took a step forward. He leaned close to her ear and spoke softly. "This instructor's got another favor up his sleeve if you go to sleep early. Be good, huh?" He didn't mention the bag in her hand. He didn't even look at it. He just stroked her hair and backed away so that she could carry on upstairs. Rebecca felt like her face was burning as she tried to understand what she was feeling. Her emotions were complicated and subtle. She felt a little upset and angry and even wanted to laugh. Is Kyle jealous again? She wondered. She and Reggie were just old classmates, and she saw him as a thoughtful guy who had brought her something nice. Once she was alone, she opened the bag. There was a book inside. When she saw the cover, she was stunned. It was the book that she had had her eyes on for a long time. She would never have expected to receive it from Reggie. The book had been published by a small independent group. She had asked Jonathan and Nancy to look for it, but they had come up blank. It was a gift beyond all her expectations. She flipped through it and realized it was brand new. She grabbed her phone and sent Reggie a message. "Where did you get the book?" The message didn't go through, and she received a notification instead. Reggie is not your friend. Verification is needed. Rebecca looked at her screen briefly before sending a friend request to Reggie. He accepted her request almost immediately, and Rebecca sent him a message. Hey, Reggie, I can't believe you found the book. Where did you get it from? My mom has a friend who works at a publishing house. He organized it for me. Rebecca was impressed. Thanks so much. I tried several publishers, but none of them had the complete edition. Reggie smiled at the message. He was glad he had made her happy. It's a pleasure. She scrolled through their conversation and thought she ought to show it to Kyle as proof that Reggie was a good friend and nothing more. If there had been anything between them, he wouldn't have unfriended her, and he would have been a lot chattier and more flirtatious. She glanced at the time and sent him another message. It's late. You have to rest before tomorrow's race. Sleep well. Reggie had typed a new message asking if she was dating Kyle, but he deleted it when Rebecca's message appeared. Instead, he wished her a good night and put his phone down. You too. Rebecca put her phone away and got ready for bed. She opened her new book and began to read, soon forgetting about the time. The following day, Rebecca sat in class and yawned. Zach saw her and asked her to answer a series of questions, which she answered correctly. Zach raised his eyebrows and glared at her, but he didn't say anything. That afternoon, Kyle had an announcement for his students. Today's training exercise will differ from what you've done so far. It's an endurance walk to town and back. You'll be given a tracker connected to a satellite, so there's no way to cheat. You'll walk from the academy to a predetermined location and back. Those who choose the best strategy in the shortest route will win, and those who arrive back last will be given extra homework. It should take about 4.5 hours to complete the exercise. Go back to your dorms and get ready. The exercise starts at 1:30 sharp. Rebecca smiled. She knew how Kyle was going to help her get away to watch her brother's race. She went to her room and pretended to prepare for the exercise. Before meeting her classmates at the entrance gates, she packed a lightweight backpack with water and other essential items. After everyone had started, she slipped away from the group and found Kyle waiting for her in his car. They soon arrived at the racetrack, just in time for the race that was about to begin. Callum was in the first group and was sitting in his car on the starting line, ready to race. Rebecca saw Wanda and hurried over to her. They waved at Callum. Good luck! The racers revved their engines in anticipation. A race official waved a green flag, and the car sped off. Go, Callum! Wanda shouted, her voice drowned by screeching tires and roaring car engines. Reggie had also arrived and was waiting on the other side of the track to prepare for his race. Rebecca stood beside Kyle and locked his eyes on Callum's car. He sped around the racetrack, and she strained her eyes to keep sight of him. She gazed at Wanda and noticed the teenager's flushed face. Wanda jumped up and down excitedly as she cheered for Callum. The cars had entered the final lap of the first round. Callum held the second position as he raced past them. Go, Callum! Rebecca shouted. She didn't know if he had heard her, and he looked like he was very concentrated on the race. If he maintained his position, he would score enough points to participate in the final race of the competition the next day. The second round was almost over, and Callum held on to second place. The distance between him and the leader closed, and he picked up speed. Kyle's phone rang, and he quickly answered it. After a short conversation, he turned to Rebecca, frowning. There's an emergency. I have to leave immediately. Rebecca nodded. Okay. Must I return to the academy by myself after the race? No, I'll pick you up. It would be best if you didn't try to get back by yourself. You might get caught out. She nodded and watched him quickly disappear into the crowd. The car sped around the racetrack at nerve-wracking speeds. It was already the fifth round, and Callum had dropped back to third place. Wanda bit her lip nervously as she kept her eyes glued on his car. Rebecca looked at the anxious girl and smiled. Don't worry, Callum's going to win. I'm sure of it. The competition continued, and Callum was still in third place as the fifth round ended. He drifted into a bend on the eighth lap, and slipped into a gap between the second and the first cars. The second-place car skidded out of control and veered off the track. Callum accelerated and swiftly sped past the car in first place, taking the lead. The crowds cheered at him, and Wanda watched him with shining eyes. He's awesome. The roar of the car's engines reverberated in her body, and she shouted with excitement. Callum held on to the lead and crossed the finish line in first place. Wanda bounced up and down and clapped her hands as Callum slowed down and blew a kiss to her and Rebecca. Callum was handsome and looked good in his racing gear and helmet. He soon became a firm favorite among the girls in the crowd, and they screamed as they watched him get out of his car. He beamed as he removed his helmet and shook his coach's hand before heading to the rest area. Wanda had already hurried over to him, and she flung herself into his arms. "That was amazing!" Callum smiled as he caught her and lifted her into the air. He spun her around and laughed. "Just wait until I win tomorrow's championship. That trophy is yours." He put Wanda down, and she gazed at him with adoration. The smell of his cologne and sweat tickled her nose, and her heart beat slightly faster. She blushed and smiled coyly. "I can't wait." Then, she quickly glanced at Rebecca and turned to ask Callum, "But what about your sister? Why don't you give your trophy to her?" Callum smirked. "Nope. I'm sure she's already been promised a trophy from someone else." Wanda's eyebrows knit together. "Do you mean Reggie?" "Yeah. Let's go. He's going to be racing soon. Maybe he'll make it to the finals." Callum pulled Rebecca close to him and rubbed her hair. "Hey, sis. What do you think?" Rebecca smiled and hooked her arm in his as they walked back to the grandstands. Callum watched the race indifferently, but all the while, he secretly analyzed his opponents and began strategizing for the next phase of the race. The second group had completed the race, and it was time for the third group to start. Reggie sat in a blue and white racing car. He was wearing a matching jumpsuit and helmet. He looked very handsome and classy. Men in bright yellow Marshall jackets hurried across the track to clear away the debris before signaling the all clear, and the racers began to rev their engines. The race official waved the green flag, and the cars sped onto the track in a plume of smoke from their rubber tires. Rebecca and Wanda cheered for Reggie at the top of their lungs. Callum stood calmly beside them and carefully watched each car. He's up against some strong racers, but should be able to pass them on the main straight. Rebecca turned to face Callum. "Do you think he'll make it into the final race?" Callum shrugged. "It's hard to say. He needs to beat 5 other racers, so I reckon his chances are 50-50. She knew her brother was pretending to be playful and casual about it, but in reality, he could be very determined once he set his mind on something. As triplets, she and her 2 brothers had that character trait in common. They didn't fool around with something they took seriously and were all very competitive. The racers sped past the grandstands, and the crowds cheered them on. Reggie had maneuvered himself into third place and kept a steady pace behind the 2 leaders. Callum raised his eyebrows in surprise. He's not bad. He'll do well if he stays in third position for the rest of the race. He has good technique, but needs more racing experience. Rebecca didn't understand what Callum meant, seeing that she had never raced. She smiled faintly and nodded as if she agreed with him. "Yeah, he's doing great. Doesn't matter, though. Let's cheer for him and show him our support." Reggie took the race very seriously. He knew that Rebecca and Kyle were watching, and although he didn't want her to see him lose, he especially didn't want to lose in front of Kyle. He pushed his foot against the accelerator pedal and felt the desire to win surge through his veins. It was as if he had broken free of his restraints and yearned to cross the finish line first. He thought about Rebecca and decided that if he made it to the top 3, he'd tell her how he felt about her. He had experienced so many twists and turns in his life, yet through all of it, his heart had taken him back to Rebecca. She had always been on his mind. He wanted to work hard, do his best, and have no regrets. On the 5th lap, he waited until he was on the main straight and then sprinted past the car in front of him, firmly securing second position. Callum whistled with surprise. "That was an impressive move." Rebecca gave him a half shrug. Why? Although she loved cars, she didn't understand how racing worked. Callum rolled his eyes. He's been lagging for a long time, but it's as if he's suddenly woken up and has managed to make up time. His lips curled into a smile, and he watched Reggie's blue and white car disappearing around the bend. I can't wait to race him in the final. Rebecca poked him in the ribs with her elbow. Don't be so cocky. He's a bit older than you and might surprise you. They continued to watch the cars speed around the racetrack and cheered for Reggie each time he came past the grandstands. She noticed how Callum watched him with intense interest, and she could see the competitive streak in him deepen. Reggie drove exceptionally fast, and she gasped as he drifted toward the red car in front of him. The finish line was just ahead, and it was neck on neck. Callum's eyes lit up with excitement. Wow, what a move! The two cars sped over the finish line, with Reggie overtaking the red car by a few feet. The crowd erupted in applause. Wanda whooped with glee. That was incredible! Let's take him some water. As they walked toward Reggie, Callum quickly grabbed her arm. Let Rebecca give it to him. He smiled mischievously and winked at Wanda. She immediately understood his subtle innuendo and smiled. Reggie had already gotten out of his car and was chatting to his coach. His coach patted him on the back. Well done. That was excellent. It's the best I've seen you do. This is the focus you need to take you through to the final race tomorrow night. Reggie beamed proudly and looked up to see Rebecca approaching him. He suddenly felt his heart beat faster and quickly finished talking to his coach before walking toward her.